Stalker 2 is a game that seems intent on making the player's life as hard as possible, while it actively works to ensure that its hero perishes at every opportunity and in every playthrough. With each tragic demise, the game gleefully basks in the glory of your rising death count, as it throws you back into the zone with limited supplies, abilities, and information, knowing full well that you'll be back at this game over screen in no time at all. The relationship between a game and its player is often a turbulent one, and there are more than a few beloved titles which place an emphasis on difficult combat scenarios or demanding survival mechanics, but few games are as committed to making the player suffer as Stalker 2 is. Against all the odds, GSC Game World have built on the incredible legacy of the Stalker series by delivering an experience that turns everything players loved and loved to hate about those titles up to 11. The game is definitely a bit of a technical mess, but it's also an undeniably outstanding achievement, even if it's not to everyone's tastes. The developers of Stalker 2 went through hell to make a game that does its absolute best to put the player through hell too, either with its invisible dangers, finicky features, or its bleak new world.
I've got a job for you, Stalker. Welcome to the area, Stalker. I've got a job for you.
The story of Stalker 2 begins in a familiar way with a pickup truck approaching the zone. In the back of that truck is Skiff, Stalker 2's player character, who is on a mission to somehow recharge his secret artifact with the anomalous energy from the area. After making it into the zone though, things unsurprisingly go very wrong when his scanner is stolen along with the rest of his belongings and he is essentially left for dead. All of which serves as a pretty great introduction to this unrelentingly hostile world. Somehow, in this opening sequence alone, as I failed to register that I was being killed by some toxic matter, attacked by an invisible entity, or shot at by enemies lurking in the dark, I managed to die 4 embarrassing deaths before even seeing the opening titles. And while I probably have gotten better with time at surviving the dangers of the zone will, unfortunately, continue to find new ways to try to kill you. Once I was awake and back on mission, I made my way toward the game's first major settlement to hopefully find out more about the men who had robbed me. After shambling along for a few minutes, I soon approached a small garden archway in the middle of a fence, looking out at the dilapidated township. And, naturally, I figured I could use this gap to step through, slide down the hill and make my way toward town. Only to discover, moments after stepping through, that I was dead, and forced to load a save from a few minutes earlier. A short while later, I again approached this archway with the good sense to make a save this time, and attempted to shuffle along the edge to drop down safely without having to take the long way around. And, again, I fell to my death from this incredibly low height. It was at this point then that I realized that Stalker 2 isn't just a game that wants to make things a bit difficult. Stalker 2 actively wanted me to die. As I saw the death counter tick up once again, it was as if I could see the developers there laughing at me for my foolish attempts at descending a hill. And these deaths just kept coming. I stupidly approached a giant anomaly after throwing bolts seemed to do nothing and found myself quickly sucked into it and dead. I tried to distract some guards and sneak past them, but they turned around and shot me dead anyway. I very nearly got killed by some mutant rats too, and I won't even start with the numerous times I have died in regular combat. After an early mission in the zone, while I was making my way back to some semblance of civilization, mission, the sky turned a funny color as the warning came over the radio that an emission was imminent. These dramatic explosions of energy are a brilliantly terrifying feature of Stalker's world, and they simply mean that you have to find shelter as soon as possible. So I began racing toward the nearest building with a roof on it, as the rest of the zone's inhabitants did the same. It was an insane, intense experience as I struggled with unopenable doors, but soon enough I did find refuge with a friendly gentleman named Vlad Spirit in a small hut, and opened the door to give myself a front row seat to the brewing storm, just as I would in the midst of a real storm. Except it soon became clear that even though this spot was fine for Vlad, Stalker 2 had decided it wasn't fine for me, and I swiftly died in the doorway. And while that was unfortunate, once I had sprung back to life, I tried a bit harder and found a much better shelter with a good view of the storm to wait it out. Then, after a good while hunkering down, I spotted some people wandering around outside and figured I'd try my luck running to a nearby merchant. But obviously the storm hadn't actually passed, and that meant I died again. Much as I recall being the case in Stalker before, the game is really annoyingly picky about what counts as cover from emissions, and you'll usually need to check your map to find the closest real cover. It would be fair to suggest that a great many number of my early deaths in Stalker 2 could be ascribed to poor planning or a fundamental misunderstanding of the rules of engagement, and certainly I died several times simply testing the game's limits. The point is, though, that on top of the risks you face in a firefight, Stalker 2 will attempt to kill you at basically every turn. If you don't keep an eye on your health, you could die suddenly if you find yourself in a patch of heavy radiation or accidentally walk into an invisible anomaly on an unassuming pathway. And spotting these anomalies is made even more difficult by some of the game's graphical bugs and issues. And even when the game isn't trying to kill you, it's usually still trying to make you suffer in some brilliant way.
Get lost, loner. I'm not reporting to a loner. I can't answer your questions.
It's probably fair to say that most games choose to optimize their design to allow for maximum fun per second for the player. To do so, they might allow your healing items to recharge, let the player become extremely overpowered, or fill their world with an excessive amount of shallow content designed to appease short attention spans. Stalker 2, on the other hand, likes to make things as difficult as possible at every turn. While this isn't uncommon for a game with survival elements, these titles usually soften the blow with easy rewards and regular pats on the back for the player. Either way, it's really the combination of those elements with tricky combat scenarios that emerge from nowhere and a stark, unforgiving, fully realized world which makes Stalker 2 feel from top to bottom like an absolute nightmare in the best possible way. It's not just that the game doesn't hold your hand, it's that it actively slaps your hand away when you reach out for help, telling you that you just need to figure it out yourself. Compared with most first-person shooters, the gunplay here feels more gritty and tactile. Guns constantly get jammed in the middle of a firefight and their condition degrades quickly, so you shouldn't expect to get too attached to any single weapon. And it's unlikely you will anyway, because none of the guns you'll have access to are ever particularly good. They're all functional, but they're not sleek and intuitive like they are in Call of Duty, for example. They're just the best that you've got to handle this world full of monsters. As well as dealing with those enemies and the random troublesome anomalies, radiation is also an ever-present threat. And while you should take anti-radiation meds if you can find them, you're usually best off simply chugging every bottle of vodka you find along your journey. The first-person animations for eating rations and imbibing energy drinks here are especially fantastic, but they can also be quite time-consuming just to make things more difficult in the heat of battle. And the menus here, both for accessing your inventory and your journal and map, are all accessed in real time too, of course. So it's critical that you find somewhere safe to prepare for combat by rummaging through your inventory and making items quickly accessible, lest you find yourself under attack while moving your vodka and stale baguettes from one slot to another. The inventory system will likely be a joy for some and a nightmare for others, but either way it will be unavoidable. There's no skill tree here giving you 50% more stamina at level 20, so any advantages that the player can find will come from equipping marginally better gear. And, probably more than that, learning to manage your inventory and trading whenever possible. This is especially true when it comes to ammunition, because Stalker 2 really doesn't want you to have any ammunition. You will basically have to unload every gun you come across to scrounge up enough bullets for your weapon, or you will need to be a heck of a lot more accurate than I am when shooting. It can be especially tricky to feel well equipped for battle when you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, given that the game doesn't have an easy fast travel system where you can just jump back to a settlement without facing more dangers on the way, forcing you to explore to find the stuff you need. And while you can uncover many great secrets by exploring Stalker 2's open world, you will most frequently stumble upon dilapidated, gloomy structures full of rubble and melancholy, where the best reward you can hope to find is a few extra bullets and a dismantled skeleton trapped inside an inconspicuous locker. I spent an embarrassingly long time trying to get past this anomaly and inside the building which I figured was harboring some awesome secret, only to find a single box of ammo and a bit more detritus. As in the previous games, you will need to learn to keep a metal bolt handy as you traverse the world. And given that the player is granted an unlimited number of these bolts, presumably thanks to some sort of anomalous bolt generating artifact in their pocket, they might well be the greatest source of fun in the game overall. Bouncing bolts off of car bonnets with the satisfying ting of each hit is a joy, and so is throwing bolts at unreactive NPCs throughout the world. Of course, they are also able to temporarily disable anomalies when thrown from a distance, allowing the player safe passage, so that's nice too. If all of Stalker 2's inconveniences, difficulties, and quirks sound like a bit of a nightmare, it's because they are. But mostly I think that's on purpose, and usually it's a good thing. Anyone who is familiar with the series will not find that to be especially surprising, but it definitely is a pleasant surprise just how much the game improves on the Stalker experience. Aside from the plentiful bugs and performance issues that do unfortunately impact the way the game plays, I am pretty sure that Stalker 2 delivers on almost everything that a fan of the series could want, and it should serve as a brilliant introduction for newcomers too, so long as those players are willing to accept the fact that the game wants them to die. If you want to have fun with Stalker 2, you're going to have to earn that right by dealing with its finicky systems and hazardous world, and you best make sure you're saving at every opportunity too. But how do you feel about Stalker 2, and how many times has the game managed to kill you? Let me know in the comments, and please do like and subscribe if you'd like to hear me talk more games. Otherwise, I'll see you next time around.